Hello and welcome. I'm Catalina Marchand-Abreu and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. The ex-wife of Bill Gates speaks publicly about the latest release of the Epstein files, which name her former husband. The U.S. says it does not agree to Tehran's demands with questions surrounding Friday's talks. U.S. brokered talks between Ukraine and Russian negotiators get underway in Abu Dhabi. The ex-wife of Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates has said that the latest release of the Epstein files have brought up painful times in her marriage. She said that people named in the records, which include her former husband, need to answer to it. Meanwhile, President Trump has said it's time for the country to move on to something else. When questioned about the files, take a listen.
No girl should ever be put in the situation that they were put in by Epstein and whatever was going on with all of the various people around him. No girl. I mean, it's beyond heartbreaking, right? I remember being those ages those girls were. I remember my daughters being those ages, right? So for me, it's personally hard whenever those details come up, right? Because brings back memories of some very, very painful times in my marriage. But I have moved on from that. I purposely pushed it away and I moved on. I'm in a really unexpected, beautiful place in my life. So whatever questions remain there of what I can't even begin to know all of it, those questions are for those people and for even my ex-husband. They need to answer to those things, not me.
Meanwhile, President Trump has said it's time for the country to move on to something else when questioned about the files by a reporter last night. Here's what he had to say.
Women who are survivors of Epstein's are unhappy with those redactions that came out. Some of them, entire witness interviews are totally blacked out. Do you think that they should be more transparent?
The fact that they thought they released too much. You know, I heard that, and you tell me something else. No, I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else. Really, you know, now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
What would you say to people who feel like they haven't gotten justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined from London by Gulf journalist Damian Riley and editor-in-chief of the news movement, Rebecca Hudson. Thank you both for joining me today.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Rebecca, we're going to start with you because Bill Gates and his ex-wife Melinda Gates have both broken their silence about the Epstein files. So tell us a bit more.
Yeah, so we hear from kind of, both sides of that marriage. Obviously, they're now divorced. Bill Gates spoke to an Australian news network last night, and I thought it was really interesting, his kind of approach to addressing, what's been revealed in these Epstein files. Him saying that it was a time in his life he regretted, but really narrowing down on a detail that one of the emails Epstein is said to have said to him was actually saved in his draft folder and it never actually reached him. And it kind of just felt like he was sort of grasping at a technicality when actually, what we are, and kind of ignoring the enormity of what's unfolding, for the world to see. And, obviously everyone, he has denied strenuously any wrongdoing, but quite a kind of almost, I thought, very relaxed and kind of casual approach, to the accusations floating around about him. And then contrast that with his former wife, Melissa, who was speaking to NPR, who's talking about these emails bringing up, an incredibly difficult time in her marriage. I'm sure your viewers are aware that there are kind of suggestions that her former husband was having kind of, extramarital affairs while spending time with Epstein. There are these kind of awful suggestions that he was going to try and sort of give her antibiotics to fix an STI, and just these really kind of grotesque and sort of distressing details. And you can imagine, whatever happened in that marriage, we don't know about, but this being something kind of incredibly traumatizing, not only for her, but obviously also for, the hundreds and hundreds of women and children who have survived that abuse.
Yes, Melinda's message did seem a bit more heartfelt, right, Rebecca? And now also President Trump now says we should all move on from this. Is this even possible, or is it even fair to say this in regards to the victims?
Yeah, exactly. To talk about this story and not acknowledge the victims, this is absolutely appalling, the idea that he thinks that he can just kind of dismiss or ignore, this story and the implications it has, not only for him, but also for kind of the justice system and for those women impacted by what happened under Epstein. And, the clip that we just saw, him just sort of trying to dismiss this story and then went on to be incredibly rude to that reporter, Caitlin Collins from CNN. I think, his approach of sort of trying to distance himself and diminish this story is not going to work. It's very politically tricky for him in the States. We know that the MAGA base finds this Epstein stuff particularly revolting. He lost his longtime ally Marjorie Taylor Greene over this. It's a tricky, hand to play, but to ignore it, I think, firstly is kind of morally derelict, but also kind of politically stupid.
And Damien, on the UK front, because the UK does seem to be more affected by than the US at this point. So there was also former Prince Andrew who has moved out of his home in Windsor. How has this eviction gone down? There were a few details, right?
Well, he had to leave in the dead of night, which is kind of fitting. He's already had an incredible fall from grace, and this is yet another step or three down the ladder. He's gone off to live on the royal estate in Norfolk, where he'll be hidden from view. And the hope is that he'll see out his dotage there and stop causing such embarrassment. It's worth pointing out that we've only seen there's 50% of the files are still to be released, if they're going to be released. And so there's the possibility that we will learn a great deal more than anyone could possibly want to about what Prince Andrew got up to on Epstein Island.
Exactly. And Damien, not only the former disgraced Prince Andrew, there's also Peter Mandelson, who's officially stepped down, and Keir Starmer that has been grilled today during Parliament. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, the irony of the Prince Andrew affair is that he needs to get out in front of it and to give an interview or to talk about what's happened. It's not enough anymore to just maintain a sort of dignified silence. But the problem is the last time he gave an interview, famously to Emily Maitlis, he nearly brought down the royal family. And that is sort of, there's a reflection of what is happening with Lord Mandelson, still Lord Mandelson, and the effect this is having on Keir Starmer's government. The revelations that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, appointed Mandelson to be our ambassador to the US, the most prominent position in the US and in the UK government, despite knowing, it came out today, that Lord Mandelson maintained his friendship with Epstein after it had been established and he'd served time for being a paedophile, is absolutely rocking the establishment. And there are strong rumours that it may bring down the Prime Minister.
Do you think that the UK now has overpassed the United States for now when it comes to the broader implication about the Epstein files?
You'd have to say that the effect is seismic in terms of it's the biggest political scandal of my lifetime, I think. The effect it's had on the perception of the royal family, not just in this country, but around the world, is impossible to understate. The fact that they removed Prince Andrew's royal title is unprecedented, I believe. And it seems that perhaps the royal family knows that there's more to come. But then also the effect it's having, if it brings down the British Prime Minister, the idea that Mandelson was providing privileged financial information straight from number 10 to Jeffrey Epstein, which is what it looks like was happening, would be just unbelievable, especially if Epstein was giving money to Mandelson and to his partner, which also looks like is the case. I mean, that's criminal. it would likely result in Lord Mandelson, going to prison for a considerable length of time. And it's a truly enormous political scandal here.
And Rebecca, you're also in London. You're from the UK. What are your thoughts on this, considering that Prime Minister Keir Starmer might have been aware or was aware of the Epstein links between Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Damien said is exactly right. I think the consequences of this are kind of probably beyond anything that I've ever seen, that any of us would have ever seen in our lifetimes. I think, if the idea that this appointment was kind of okayed, knowing what we now know was known, it is absolutely astounding and does call into question, the nature of judgment, why these decisions were made, the power that Lord Mandelson, although for how long that we remain to see, was wielding over a government that he isn't a part of. I think it is absolutely astounding. And I think it's such an interesting contrast here where we're in kind of almost constitutional crisis about what's going to happen. Contrast that to the States, where there are also an equally large amount of people implicated and involved, and their president is barely talking about it. At least today, for all of his flaws, Starmer stood at PMQs, had a very strongly worded statement, and was ready to take the questions from Kemi Badenoch. I mean, why he's in this mess, I think it goes to the point around his judgment. But the two different approaches across the Atlantic, I think, is really interesting.
I think a lot of people had a loss of judgment when it comes to Epstein, right? So we're going to move on to another story right now. The U.S. has said it will not give in to Tehran's demands as talks previously planned for Oman are in doubt. While speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump wouldn't say where the talks would be held later this week. So let's start with you here, Damien. The U.S. just said that Iran did not agree to Tehran's. They did not agree to Tehran's demand. So this is breaking news. Will the talks still go ahead?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, you'd think that the U.S. is holding all of the negotiating cards, and that the Iranian regime would be extremely wise, given Trump's threats, to get around the negotiating table without causing too much trouble. However, the Iranian regime is well known for its delaying tactics and for a little bit of trickery and making things overly complex. And so we'll see this time if how much patience Trump has. Trump has already, to his credit, showed quite a lot of patience. He's been quite vague about when the negotiations have to occur by, whether it's sort of later this week or next week. But given his promises to the Iranians when they were protesting in the streets that, keep going, help, it's on its way, it does look slightly surprising just quite how willing he seems to indulge the Iranian regime. But you never know with him. He's unpredictable in almost everything he does. And so he may suddenly decide time's up.
And Rebecca, there's also been a lot of back and forth regarding the location for the talks. The U.S. wanted Turkey, Tehran was demanding for Oman, and now they're not going to go through with this request. So what does this say about Iran's negotiation tactics?
Well, this is sort of quite out of the Iranian tactic playbook, if you like, the idea of sort of trying to sort of dismantle, disrupt details as a way of kind of getting one over on the person that they're sort of getting around the negotiating table. They previously were having these talks in Oman, which could be an argument for why it would happen there. But also, not having these talks in Istanbul means that there's kind of less scrutiny potentially of what happened. It would have been a bilateral rather than with multiple other leaders from the region. So it kind of more discreet, more behind closed doors. But this kind of disruptive tactic, this way of sort of trying to get one over on the States, I think is something that we probably could expect. And I think maybe also tells us a little bit about what the intention is from both parties going into these talks.
And Damien, diplomacy is at a fragile state here, right? So can this standoff between both regarding the location actually block the diplomacy road here? And can it convince Trump for military action?
Yeah, it can certainly convince him for military action. I mean, he is installing, an enormous proportion of the US Navy off the Iranian coast. He's made very, very clear that if diplomacy fails, bad things will happen. I think that's an exact quote. I don't think it will take much to tip him over. I mean, obviously, he doesn't want to get America embroiled in a lengthy ground war in Iran. and particularly not with the midterms coming up in November, and the repercussions that could have on opinion polls. But certainly decisive strikes, particularly if the Iranians refuse to give up their nuclear ambitions yet again, cannot be ruled out at all. So, yeah, it's slightly surprising that the Iranians are being difficult about a location, but like Rebecca said, entirely unsurprising.
Rebecca, what do you think? Do you think diplomacy here will fail or will it succeed?
I mean, you have to have kind of great faith that it will. And I think Dana makes a great point about, embroiling the US in yet another foreign war is not something that's going to play very well for Trump domestically. But I think, as we kind of can all agree, the most predictable thing about Trump is his unpredictability. And while we would all think that that would make sense domestically, I sort of struggle to understand what kind of Trump's foreign policy is, ever. So I think we can hope that it works, because I don't think any of us want to see tensions inflame further between these two kind of polar powers. But whether that kind of hope is enough, I think we yet to see.
Yes, because Damien, talks originally, if they're held or if they were going to be held in Oman, have been narrowed to nuclear issues only. So where does this actually leave the question of leadership change in Iran? Because this was actually the main focus to begin with, right?
Well, I think the US side wanted there to be three issues, which is the nuclear talks, the missiles, and also Iranian support for proxies throughout the region. And the Iranians, I believe, are saying they will only talk about nuclear, or they won't talk at all. Where does it leave diplomacy? I understand the importance for the Iranians of looking as if they're calling the shots. But I'm not sure that Trump is a negotiator who's happy to cede that authority in any negotiation. So, yeah, extremely volatile times. And you get the feeling that it is a tinderbox. And regime change will certainly be Trump's goal if push comes to shove.
Damien and Rebecca, thank you for your thoughts there. That's going to be a developing story this week, of course. Now moving on to another developing story. Ukrainian and Russian negotiators have begun a second round of U.S. brokered talks in Abu Dhabi today. So the 2 days trilateral meetings come after Zelensky said Russia's exploited a U.S.-backed energy truce after attacking Ukraine with a record number of ballistic missiles on Tuesday. Rebecca, Ukraine, Russia, and U.S. officials are in Abu Dhabi today. This comes after Zelensky accused Russia of undermining U.S. peace efforts and breaking this temporary ceasefire that they had promised to the U.S. So what do you think about all this? Where do you think these talks are heading?
Yeah, I mean, I think Zelensky has a very fair point. He said that, the action of Russia, 24 hours ago when they are bombarding Ukraine, targeting their energy grid, so that tens of thousands of Ukrainians are waking up today without any heating, I think very much can be seen as an act of a group and of a party that aren't particularly motivated by adhering to the terms of a ceasefire or getting around the negotiating table in a productive way. We haven't had a huge amount of readout from the talks from today, but we do know they're going ahead tomorrow, which I suppose gives us a suggestion that they were sort of productive. But I think we've heard a lot of this before. There is a constant standoff between, Russia's refusal to give Ukraine security guarantees and Ukraine's, lack of willingness to give, Russia areas like the Donbass that they want. So it feels, like we've kind of been here before. But I think absolutely the actions of Russia, last night, breaking the ceasefire, as the minute that they could, I think just gives us an idea of the volatility here and how high the stakes are.
And Damien, Ukraine's foreign minister also said the talks will focus on military issues. What are they? And do you think there's going to be anything groundbreaking that they're going to discuss?
It's hard to know. I mean, we're now into the fourth year, I think, the fourth anniversary of this conflict, which was meant to be a very, very short conflict. And I feel like we've been again and again at a point where things appear to be on the brink of stopping, only for things to continue. And it's hard to see what's different this time. I know, as Rebecca said, the sticking point is still over the Donetsk and the Donbass region, and also post-conflict security guarantees and humanitarian concerns and exchange of prisoners and so on. But it is hard to get your hopes up once again, especially when there's so much other stuff to occupy the attention of the international community, and particularly the American community, in terms of what's happening in Iran and also Epstein. So, yeah, who knows? what will happen. Presumably, this at some point, the Russian economy is going to acknowledge, or Putin is going to have to acknowledge, the expense of this conflict, the ongoing conflict, and perhaps that might bring things to a head. But you'd thought if that was going to happen, it would have happened 2 years ago. So who knows? On and on it goes. I really hope that something might happen this week, but I won't hold my breath.
Yes, Damien, because we were discussing this before. What do we actually know about the consequences of this war in Russia domestically, right? Militarily, economically, and politically, because figures and any other official information is pretty scarce, right? So how much has this war actually weakened Moscow back home?
Well, I mean, it's very, very hard to know that because, of course, it's hard to get independent figures on the economy or on opinion polls. I mean, I've heard rumors that it's enormously popular with some people, but then I've spoken to Russians in London who say talking about the Ukraine is rather like talking about Brexit to British people, in that it's enormously divisive. People are very stuck in their view. Some people are in favour, some people are incredibly against it. So yeah, it's very hard to know. But we've heard rumors in the past that the Russian economy is creaking dreadfully under the expense, but still the conflict goes on, and the Russian economy hasn't collapsed. So it seems to defy gravity in that respect. It's very hard to know. This whole thing is mystifying in so many ways.
That's right. I think I also read a report today this week that Russian companies were not amongst the 100 top tech companies in the world, which could be a telltale sign of how their economy is going, right? Rebecca, there was also this new CSIS report. I don't know if you read about it. It puts a combined Russian and Ukrainian casualties near 2 million. It says with Russia alone at 1.2 million, reportedly Russia taking the heavy loss here. So does this suggest that Russia might finally be ready for the war to end?
Well, you would think so, but I think Damien's phrase that this is sort of mystifying, I think, is kind of the perfect phrase for it. We also know that Russia are kind of shipping in troops from across the world, these awful meat grinder offensives where young men from North Korea, where Nepal, parts of Southeast Asia are being kind of tricked, for want of a better word, into fighting on Russia's front line. So, they might be exhausting their own population. I would imagine they are. But through these kind of, their allegiances and alliances they have with other powers, they are able to somehow sustain their war machine. And the point around transparency and not knowing the impact, again, makes this whole story such a kind of difficult one to report on, because, we don't know whether Russia is kind of on the brink of collapse, or actually, if for whatever reason that, there is, they've got the ability to sustain and maintain this offensive for much longer. It feels incredible to me that they are funding such an expensive war with all the sanctions that they face, and yet somehow this remains sort of something popular domestically. But the lack of free and fair reporting, as we know all about, I think would mean that lots of people in Russia maybe don't have, the greatest idea about what's really happening.
And this is about the latest. I even just heard about this. Damien, what do you think? Because there's fear of a new arms race as U.S. and Russia's nuclear weapons treaty is due to expire. So is there a sense of urgency here?
I wish there was. I mean, we'll find out this week if there is a sense of urgency. But I think again and again, we felt that things are coming to a head, and that there is an impetus behind making this stop. And certainly Trump, he famously said he could stop this in 24 hours if he was re-elected. And I think 24 hours has passed. I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be going on just as much as it ever has. There's been ceasefires. The most recent one, just as Rebecca said, as soon as it ended, Putin sent over some munitions, airborne munitions. So it's, who knows? We've been here again and again, and nothing seems to stop it. It's enormously depressing. It's horrifying in terms of the number of casualties, not just from both sides, but from other countries like North Korea and Nepal. And it seems to serve nobody. So it would be fantastic if this week some miracle could happen and it could end. Particularly as, in the winter for the Ukrainians without power must be unbelievably awful.
That miracle perhaps would be having Zelensky and Putin in the same room, right, Rebecca? What do you think? Will this ever happen?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the way things stand at the moment, I think it feels really unlikely, to be honest, which I think is a grave shame. And you have to kind of hope that the people in the room are serving the needs necessary. But I think it feels poles apart. And I think everything Damien said is right. This is the most destructive and depressing story, and it has been running and running. And the idea that it would be brought to a conclusion is one that we would all hope would happen, but again, probably wouldn't hold our breaths for.
That's right, running and running. It's also a bit like Iran, right? Stalling tactics. Who knows? Do you think, Damien, that Russia will get what they want finally, which is territorial concessions, and they won't stop stalling until they get it?
Personally, I really, really hope not. I mean, the whole thing is illegal, an invasion into a sovereign country. But the Russians, throughout their history, have waged very long and slow wars until they get what they want. But I sometimes wonder whether the Western community is trying to prop up Ukraine to drain the coffers of the Russians. And if they are doing that, and if that is the reason for doing it, then there's some, it sort of makes sense that it's being dragged on this long, and it's a point of pride and principle for Putin that he won't stop. Yeah, I mean, to not get what he set out to get would look like defeat. And he probably won't settle for that. So something has to be done, but whether a solution has to be found, but whether that solution will be found in Abu Dhabi or the UAE remains to be seen. And as I said earlier, I won't hold my breath.
So much talk of war here. We're going to move on to a lighter topic now. Pinterest has sacked 2 engineers after they tracked which workers lost their jobs during a recent round of layoffs. The company's CEO said the cuts are to double down on their AI approach. Pinterest will lose around 15% of its workforce after the restructure. So, Damien, we're going to start with you. Pinterest, also known as the OG, the headline of vision boards here, is cutting jobs. So what's the reason behind it? Do you think it lost its luster following, this was a long time ago, the creation of Instagram or AI now, other social media networks? Do you think it's not keeping up with competition?
Well, I must confess, I know very little about Pinterest. Whenever I try to use these things, I try to use Snapchat, I feel extremely old because I don't understand it. I try to use Pinterest and I feel extremely male because I think it's probably aimed at the female brain in terms of mood boards and creating looks and so on. It makes no sense to me. I've tried it, but the women in my life love it. But from what I've read, I'm not so sure it's down to anything more than the terrifying advance of AI, in that jobs that were being done by the human at Pinterest can now be done by the robot. And so they want to free up more space to invest in the robot. And so it's very sad seeing jobs lost to AI. And I think we're probably only at the beginning of that. I feel sorry for the engineers who got fired, because I think all they did was make some sort of program that monitored who was being fired within being made redundant within the business. And that shouldn't be too secret. So yeah, it seems a sad situation. But as I say, I'm not familiar with Pinterest at all. It even the spelling of it seems strange to me.
I wouldn't be worried about the engineers. They'll probably get hired by another tech company very soon, right? Rebecca, you told us that you love Pinterest. So what's your review? You use it a lot. Do you think it's lacking? Does it need AI now?
No, I think you said it perfectly in your introduction. It's the OG, scrapbook. I think it's absolutely perfect as it is. I think it's kind of one of the only pristine places on the internet where I can, piece together, what I want to look like on my wedding day. I'm currently not engaged, so, planning for the future. But, what I want my kind of holiday wardrobe to look like in my living room. I think it's perfect. And the idea that it would kind of be, improved by AI and rendered images, I think is desperately sad. So I'd really like to preserve the sanctity of Pinterest. And if Damien ever wants someone to show him how to kind of mood board, I'm very happy to spend the time, because I think it's very relaxing. And I think it's devastating, and also, incredibly sad that 2 people have lost their jobs for doing something that I think, probably anyone with sort of half a brain could figure out if it was someone being made redundant. But I'd love to preserve the sanctity of Pinterest, and I make the claim now.
Because, Rebecca, what do you think? Do you think that the tech world or companies are going through a bit of a revolution here? Maybe it might be a bit late. The revolution might already be here. But what do you think of this AI and companies? I think there were also layoffs in Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that we're going to see more and more and more, not just necessarily kind of low skilled work, but seemingly kind of, incredibly skilled workers being replaced by lines of code. And so I suppose really now, I don't think it's a conversation around kind of, is it going to happen or not? I think it's how do we kind of address it? And, everyone sort of learning how to harness the power of AI to make them better at their jobs, not to have AI sort of replace their jobs. But I mean, I'm loath to turn it into something too scary, although I think it might be. And I think if we kind of try and cling to the optimistic that this, could kind of revolutionize humanity and give us all loads more time back, that might be great. But I might be being a bit Pollyanna-ish about that, I think.
Yeah, because I think this reminds me of the story when Elon Musk took over X and there was a lot of restructuring and a lot of change, a lot of AI for the better or the worse. What do you think, Damien? Do you think Pinterest, for example, needs new leadership to keep up with the new age, or should we keep Pinterest vintage?
I don't know about that, but I mean, if Rebecca is Pollyanna-ish, I'm a Cassandra in that I'm absolutely petrified of AI and what it's doing. You talk of Elon Musk. He went on Joe Rogan just before Christmas and he talked about the supersonic tsunami of AI. And he said it's going to wash away all white collar jobs before we know it. He said anybody that sat behind a computer typing out things or doing anything that involves a keyboard, those jobs would go, he said, and the exact quote was like lightning. And people that sit behind keyboards doing jobs, those are white collar jobs. And blue collar jobs report to white collar jobs. And so in no time at all, I think, if I take him at his word, what he's saying is that in not long at all, blue-collar jobs will be reporting to robots. And so I think what is happening at Pinterest and elsewhere is the tip of the iceberg. And then we will see it play out at supersonic tsunami speed very soon. It's terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
And Rebecca, what do you think? Because as we said, you use Pinterest. I don't know what other social media networks you use, but do you enjoy this human-to-human interaction? Do you think Pinterest should probably stay the same?
Yeah, I do. I really do. And I think it's really unique because I think, we get these incredibly tailored algorithms on Instagram and TikTok. They're so sensitive and intelligent. So, you watch one video, you then get served 50 others. And I appreciate, all the hard work that's gone into kind of hard coding those algorithms. But what I love about Pinterest is that although you are online, it kind of feels a little bit analog. And I think lots of people kind of crave the idea that they're not being bombarded by adverts or SpomCon or influencers in their bikinis. And actually, it's just you and your mood board for 2026, which is what I want to use it for. So I think lots of places can be enhanced by AI, but I'm not convinced that Pinterest is the case for it.
And what do you think is going to happen to the two engineers? What's their future going to look like?
I have my fingers crossed they go and make their own Pinterest. It's even better, and I'll sign up.
We will. It's that time of the show now where Damien and Rebecca have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. Let's start with you, Rebecca. Anyone visiting Rome's Trevi Fountain will have to pay for the pleasure now. Tell us why.
Yes. Well, I imagine that you two are both Emily in Paris fans. And if you're not, it's an incredible Netflix show. Yeah. Of course you are. She probably would Pinterest. And, kind of popularized for sort of Gen Z audiences. She goes and has a very Italian romance, taking lots of beautiful photos in front of the Trevi Fountain. I hear it's also got quite a lot of historic quality to it, but someone else can talk to you about that. But now to kind of manage the sort of over-tourism around the Trevi Fountain, I think it gets 70,000 visitors a day. The City of Rome have implemented a sort of €2 ticket. So you've got to queue up, buy a ticket, and then there's kind of crowd control around the fountain. So you get a little bit more time to actually see what you're queuing up for and hopefully actually get a better quality selfie, which is great for your Pinterest. So I'm delighted to see how it works. And I wonder if we'll see kind of other places following suit. I can imagine them doing something similar in London if it works.
That's right. It's the Emily in Paris inflation. Who knows, she'll be filming there next and they'll be adding some type of fee or tax, right? Damien, now to you. China has rolled out the robot police. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I mean, can you think of anything more terrifying? They've got robots equipped with AI that are going to be working as traffic enforcers, handing out tickets. And I think exactly what I was just talking about. This is how it starts. The robots, we're hapless drivers in China reporting to robots enforcing the law, and try pleading with a Chinese robot if you don't think you were going too fast or you're doing anything wrong. I think this is the less and less acceptable face of AI. It started off AI being, well, not AI, you could have a Hoover that would operate in your home without you there, that would sort of bump around, cleaning up, sucking up the dirt. And I felt that was the acceptable face of AI. This to me feels very, very much unacceptable and terrifying.
Rebecca,
but I think it's increasingly less the end of the wedge.
And Rebecca, what do you think? Do you think we'll ever be seeing these robots in Europe, for example, or the UK?
I think probably some of the drivers in Europe could do with a little bit more sort of dystopian authoritarianism, traffic police, or certainly maybe I'm just talking about myself. I mean, I think I agree. I think this is pretty kind of spooky stuff. But maybe if it freed up someone to go and do something even more valuable with their time, that's okay. I'm trying to sort of make the pro-AI argument, but I'm struggling a little bit. But yes, this is a little spooky. Even watching the video now is sort of making me feel a bit weird, to be honest.
Damien, do you think these robots are probably doing the work that humans don't want to do? They don't want to deal with people being mad at them or with other drivers. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, people need jobs. People need work. So I think you can, you start off saying they take this job and then they could take jobs working in restaurants or hotels, being waiting staff. And I'll make the argument that people don't enjoy those jobs, but people need those jobs, especially in the UK and in Europe. So, I don't like it. I think if Elon Musk is right, then these things are going to be, he says that one AI will be cleverer than all humanity combined by next year. And if they're going to walk around in robot form, so they're stronger and quicker than us and cleverer than us by factors impossible for us to imagine, I don't understand why we think that they will be doing the hard lifting for us rather than the other way around. So I'm very frightened that not only are they going to take all the jobs, but that we're going to be working for them before we know it. And I think that's a terrifying thing. We're only 3 years into AI. I think ChatGPT came out about 3 years ago. Oh, wow. So things are changing incredibly quickly. And I'm worried that things are getting out of control.
Do you share in this concern, Rebecca? Yesterday we were also talking about Moltbook, right? So what do you think? You think these robots will turn on us in a matter of years?
I think unless we're very polite to them, there's definitely a risk. So I think we were saying before, weren't we? Sort of any time that you're using one of these sort of chatbots to sort of book a flight or a hotel, sort of do say thank you and sort of treat them as you would, anyone else. I think absolutely. I think the power of AI, I think we've got absolutely no idea about. And if this is how advanced we are just 3 years in, I think, kind of where this could end up could be kind of incredible for humanity. Or to Damien's point, we could all become kind of enslaved by a kind of master robot class. Which I don't really fancy in my future. But I'm trying to sort of remain cautiously optimistic about it, that potentially it might mean that we'll go and write amazing poems and plays and design things and make great art because we've got more time. So maybe that's the benefit of these sort of robo-police. Maybe.
What do you think? We'll be seeing them in the US, perhaps? Maybe they'll be replacing ICE. Who knows?
Can we please not introduce Donald Trump to sort of robot soldiers, please? Can we just stop that happening, please? Give them a Pinterest.
We'll keep them in China for now. Thank you to both our guests today, Gulf journalist Damien Riley and editor-in-chief of the News Movement, Rebecca Hudson. That's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. GNT is coming up next. Goodbye.